Rick is a big personality. You know, he wasn't born in Texas, but you swear he's a Texan.
My first memory of Rick is taking him to meet Boone Pickens. You know, you're at the Yankee Stadium, one of the great moments in the history of conservation. I don't know where quail would be without Boone Pickens and Rick Snipes, but I'm sure glad we're not going to have to get that question answered.
He is very focused.
All right, load him up. We'll go again.
He is very energetic, and I think that resolve comes from the fact that he came from North Carolina, and he watched the quail populations disappear in his home state. And when he moved to West Texas, which he often refers to as the Alamo of quail conservation, he said, "Not on my watch. It's not going to happen here." Rick moved from North Carolina because he's born quail hunting over in that country, and that country is just devoid of quail anymore, so he went west young man.
It was just open country and wild birds. The fascination of finding those birds in this kind of country is what hooked me initially.
Selling his business, a successful business in the Carolinas, relocating to a suburb of Swenson, Texas, which is a suburb of Aspermont, which still people don't know where it is.
It was more of a mutual, what do you think? Don't you think you'd like to live out? Yeah, I think so. Let's do it.
Of course, his wife is just unbelievable, you know, to move from the society of North Carolina to Aspermont, Texas.
Let's go. My bags are packed. That's exactly what it was.
That'd been a trip I'd been taking by myself. I promise you.
To build a dream ranch in a spot that he'd been hunting for years, but felt like if he moved on site, he could personally get involved with every project, with every bit of land, and then build out the ideal place to hunt quail.
We're going to South Bend, Raul?
He's done everything he could to tweak the knobs to make every square inch of that ranch usable by quail, and that's the key to quail management.
He's the ultimate quail aficionado. I mean, he runs all of his own equipment, trains his own bird dogs. He does it all himself, and I don't know anyone else that does that to the extent that Rick does.
My goal was to have every square foot of this ranch be quail habitat. And I wanted to be able to take my friends hunting and have them see dogs, have them have beautiful scenery, have them enjoy themselves and be in beautiful country all day long. All of those goals of making the place a beautiful place to hunt also made it a better place for quail.
Well, it's heaven. I mean, it's just absolutely perfect. It's the Augusta of quail ranches.
Different elements of quail hunting attracted me. The fact that something's always happening, something's moving. And also, you had to have a little skill to shoot the bird.
Rick Snipes is unquestionably the best wing shooter I've ever seen. You know, it can be a little intimidating as a hunter to go side by side with this guy, but he makes you better when you do something great. Boy, you feel like you're king of the world because he's so free to compliment and so quick to tell you how good you are, even though you know you can't even carry his shell bag.
And you know, if we're bird hunters, we really don't hunt birds. I mean, we hunt the dogs that hunt the birds. And I think the dogs fascinated me.
Rick feels like that a puppy should be a puppy, just like I guess a child should be a child.
He lets them play for a year and a half before they even point a covey.
And his dogs have no equal. They're just the best that I've ever seen, period.
I think the dogs that you have so much reflect the time in your life that you had them. You know, and so probably the greatest of all dogs for me would have been Brisket. And I had him in started in my early 30s, and he lived 12 years. And he saw me through the rough beginnings, and I learned a lot by going hunting with him.
With his leadership in the Rolling Plains Quail Research Foundation and all of his involvement and all the time that he spends trying to improve conditions for quail hunting and create more quail for people to go out and hunt in the future, he's giving back.
Our whole goal has not been to make this thing perfect, but to give the guy who wants to exert some influence on his ranch the chance to do so. There are some people in the quail hunting community who are perfectly content with having birds when it rains and not having birds when it doesn't. To me, that's never been acceptable.
He is laying down a future for my kids and my grandkids, and for them to go out and be able to experience something that he was fortunate enough to experience.
Well, I think that's his whole motivation, you know, that he's going to leave it better than he found it a lot better than he found it.
It's just something he did so naturally that I guess he just doesn't feel like he should get to work for it. I think it's very special to him. Very.
While I'm sitting here and I'm being honored, the real honor goes to the people who are sitting in the audience. You know, I've often thought that the perfect symbol for this award would be a mirror where I could hold it up and people could see in it their own face and understand who the forces behind this deal really are. And it's the guys at Park Cities. And so I feel very honored that that group would honor me. It's humbling. You know, it's sort of a tough deal when you make your notes, and while you're making some notes, you realize that you want to come help me out with this? That you realize with your eye condition, you may not be able to read them. Should I stand further back?
Just go ahead and take that.
Well, I can't do that and read too.
You got your.
Okay, let's try that. I'm standing here in a little bit of a state of shock, you know. Until I watched that video, I thought Joe Crafton and I were the same age. After the video, my chief worry is that I may be older than Bubba. You know, and Rollins, you know, he gets this Carolina stuff messed up, but, you know, hell, Dale's from Oklahoma. And you give him two states with the same name, that's a little much. But I was born in South Carolina and grew up in South Carolina, was fortunate enough to go to college in North Carolina and build a business and work in North Carolina. So I'm both. I did everything in both states, including pay taxes. So I'm both a sandlapper and a Tar Heel. And, you know, I'm very happy to be out here in Texas. We've got some thank yous to make, first of all, to you and Park Cities. I mean, you're an unbelievable organization, and what you've done for quail is incredible. With what you saw on Pete's graph, I want to put that to you in even more graphic terms. The work that Dr. Rollins started, he brought us the eyeworm, and he said, you know, what do we do with this? Is this a problem? And we handed that to Dr. Kendall, and we said, is that a problem? If it is, how big a problem is it? And if it's a big problem, what do we do about it? And let me tell you something. Dale's innate curiosity, coupled with Ron's superior intellectual drive and dedication to this deal, will have changed quail hunting in Texas forever. When the solutions developed in his lab are fully implemented across the rolling plains, we will have done for quail what Peter Hudson and his crew did for red grouse in the UK and Scotland. And all that is because of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Been remarkable. I might need a flashlight. I also want to thank Boone. You know, I mean, I don't know where we would be without him. What he's done for quail, what he's done for Park Cities, hell, what he's done for Texas and all the institutions here, including Oklahoma State. So we don't want to forget that. You know, the first time Bubba introduced me to Boone and we were talking, and he looked at me and goes, hell, Rick, what are they going to teach you and me about how to grow a quail? He goes, you know how to grow a quail. I know how to grow a quail. What are they going to teach us? And the real answer was not much. Well, what they've done, Boone, is they've now given us a way to protect the quail once we've grown them. And that is a sea change from where we have ever been. And again, Very proud to have been a part of that, and thank you for all you've done to make that happen. You know, I often tell my friends to take a good, close look at me, and I'll tell you guys to do the same. I may be the only guy that you meet in your life who has already won the lottery twice. The first time I won the lottery, it was in January of 1949 when I was born in Anderson, South Carolina, in the United States of America. Which today is still the greatest prize of all. The second time was when I met and married my wife, Lana. You know, you talk about a day's work. That was one. She's been unbelievable. She's smart, she's strong, she's beautiful, and she has been everything in the world to me. And none of this stuff could have happened without her. So thank you, Lana. I look out in the audience and I can see some of my old quail hunting buddies. We got Pat Patrick from Anderson, South Carolina here. We've been hunting birds together since we were 10 or 12 years old. We hunted them last year and we were 68. So what was that, 56, 58 years? I mean, we went many a mile and he's still the best shot I've ever been around in my life. I see John Campbell from Greenville, South Carolina, who's probably walked more miles with me than anybody. And then there's a really important guy from Plano, Texas, Jim Perry, who got me out here in 1980 and started me hunting birds in Texas. So if you're glad to have me, thank him. If you're not, you can curse him. But it's because of him that I'm here, and Jim Perry, thank you so much. There are a couple other guys I need to recognize, and one is Raul Lujan, who is my foreman on the ranch and my right-hand man and my partner in all this quail enterprise. And when Bubba said I ran my own equipment, well, I used to. But Raul figured out that if he ran it, the results were much better and the maintenance costs were far lower. So if I get in a dozer now, you know, he runs to get the building repair equipment out. And Raul is also, without question, the best man I've ever seen in my life with a puppy. I mean, when our pups are weaned, we start walking them. And when Raul comes back with them, you know, they're different. He is remarkable. He's got the patience of a saint, and he's unbelievable. Another guy here who has been instrumental in our dogs, and almost all of them, is Alan Vincent. Alan takes my young dogs to the Dakota prairies in the summer, and he believes what I believe, and that is that each dog has its own schedule and its own timetable, and will get there in its own time if he has the innate genetic qualities to do it. And Alan's pretty special with a young dog, and Alan, thank you for all you've done for us. And you know, when I see all these guys and I reminisce about the places we've been and the things we've done, I'm reminded somewhat of a quote that's attributed to Chief Seattle, but almost everything that's said about the West was attributed to him, so it may not be accurate. But in talking about the beauty of the West and some of the stark scenes that you see even where we are in Stonewall County, he said, you have to see it to believe it. But just as importantly, you have to believe it in order to see it. And what that says to me about quail hunting is it's one of those things in which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. You know, if you think about quail hunting, what you did, your dogs, you go home tonight and you think about all the things that make up your quail hunting. And then you think about it in a holistic sense, in a general sense. Not only what you did and who did it with you, but what you feel. And when you do that, you'll find that there's a gap. There's a gap between the things that make up quail hunting and the experience that is quail hunting. And you know, that gap is why we do this deal. You know, that indefinable sense of accomplishment, of satisfaction, of joy, being outside, being with your dogs, being with your friends, all of those things, that little gap is what keeps us coming back. And it's what has made it a very special part of my life for a very long time. Now, you've already heard about Ron Kendall and you've heard about Dale Rollins, and one little note about Dale is that I think in April he'll be inducted into the Texas Parks and Wildlife Hall of Fame. And I'll promise you, there's never been anyone inducted more deserving than Dale. In fact, with his bobwhite brigades, I've often told him, I said, Dale, you know, with those brigades, you don't have to worry much. I said, you've built your own stairway to heaven. He's a pretty special guy, and we could not have a finer steward of our finest asset, which is the research ranch, or of our very game itself than Dale Rollins. So Dale, thank you. I got a couple of few gentlemen that I want to thank, and I want to preface it by something said by the 19th century English philosopher, statesman, and politician. And that was back in the 19th century when you could apply all those terms to one person. Pretty hard to do that today. Edmund Burke said that the credit for all progress can be laid at the feet of unreasonable men. And by unreasonable, he didn't mean the guy that tried to change the terms of the contract at the last minute or the guy that tried to get the last dollar out of a deal. No, what Burke meant was men who were unwilling to accept the status quo without question, who looked at things and said, as they were, and said, nah, I don't think so. These are guys that crossed the oceans and invented the steam engine. And I want to introduce you to a few of them now. They've been the most important guys in this whole effort. And the guys that I was privileged to serve with on the board of the Research Foundation. We had a couple of guys who served with distinction and have moved on to other things. Ray Stoker from Odessa, Texas. Stan Graff from Dallas. Our current board is Steve Snell from Starkville, Mississippi. Dan Crane, magnificent member from Fort Worth. Joe Crafton from Dallas. Now, all of you who know Joe know that when he chooses to engage, his influence is outsized. And we have been fortunate on the board of the foundation to receive that. And then in Albany, Texas, we have Justin Trail, who is the current president of the board. And of course, we have our North Star, A.V. Jones, who A.V. is special. He has shown us through the way he has lived his life how very much we have at stake. And that's been a special thing for me to remember, to always understand what it is we could lose. Thank you, A.V. Thank you very, very much. Someone asked me, where do we go from here? What's your hope for the future, Rick? What do you think your vision is? And I'd like to try to give that to you using an old naval seagoing proverb. And the saying goes like this. It says that a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are built for. My hope, we have a number, I'm sure, of bright young wildlife biologists and scientists in the state of Texas. My hope is that they will be inspired by the examples set by Dr. Rollins and Dr. Kendall to leave their comfortable berths in that safe harbor of habitat and weather, cross the breakwater of peer resistance, and venture into the open seas of science. And when they do that, the pace of change will radically happen. We will be moving forward at a pace heretofore unknown. I want to close with to tell you what my experience was when we moved out here. Friend after friend said to me, Rick, why are you moving to Texas? You're moving to Texas? Why? And I would answer by quoting our famous gangster, John Dillinger, who, when asked why he robbed banks, said, that's where the money is. So I moved to Texas because that's where the birds were. And you know what? The birds are still here. We have them. And with people like you and events like this, we're going to keep them. Thank you.